Have you ever felt someone smile with their mouth, but grab your arm like they own your choices? A friend of mine, let's call her M, is 35 weeks pregnant, and her mother-in-law just crossed a line. Why did a simple goodbye leave her shaken, and wondering if her birth plan even matters? Have you ever felt someone smile with their mouth, but grab your arm like they own your choices? A friend of mine, let's call her M, is 35 weeks pregnant, and her mother-in-law just crossed a line. Why did a simple goodbye leave her shaken, and wondering if her birth plan even matters? Let's rewind a bit. This isn't the first time M felt uneasy around her mother-in-law. In fact, for months now, her MIL has been asking, no, pressuring her husband to be at the hospital when M gives birth. And here's the thing, she never asks M directly, always the husband, as if she's hoping that if she catches him alone, he'll give in. Maybe she thinks a one-on-one moment will crack the boundary they've set. To be fair, her husband's been solid. Every time he tells her gently but firmly, it'll just be the two of us. And each time the mother-in-law gives a polite, okay. But here's the kicker, those okays don't feel real. They feel strategic, like a placeholder answer until she can find a new angle to get what she wants. Now, here's where it gets personal. When you're this close to giving birth, your body changing, your mind anxious, your world about to turn inside out, the last thing you want is to manage someone else's feelings. And that's what M feels she's doing. Not just setting a boundary, but constantly redefending it. And I have to ask, why is this even a debate? The birthing room is not a family reunion. It's not about hurt feelings, traditions, or who deserves to be there. It's about safety, focus, and the emotional well-being of the mother. Yet so many mothers-in-law, especially from older generations, still treat it like it's their right, like their presence is some sort of earned reward. And look, I get it. For some women, being there for the birth of a grandchild is deeply emotional and symbolic. But when that desire starts bulldozing over the parents' wishes, especially the mother's, it stops being about love and starts being about control. What gets me is the subtle way this happens. Not yelling, not demanding, just repeated asks, side conversations, making the husband the middleman. It's not loud, but it's exhausting. And it works sometimes, which is why people keep doing it. So here's the real question. When someone keeps pushing the same boundary, even after you've said no, how do you respond? Is it enough to keep repeating yourself? Or is there a point where you stop being polite and start being crystal clear, even if that makes things uncomfortable? I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to hold a boundary so many times it started to feel like you were the problem, just for having one? But what happens when a boundary isn't just pushed verbally, but physically crossed, even for a second? Because that's exactly what happened to M just last week. She and her husband were visiting his mother, likely the last visit before the baby comes. Everything had been going okay. Not great, not terrible, just that usual tension where every conversation feels like a test. If you've been there, you know. You're not sure if you're walking on eggshells or if someone's laying them in your path on purpose. As they were getting ready to leave, M's mother-in-law suddenly reached out, grabbed her arm firmly and said, "You better tell me when you go into labor." Now, it wasn't a full-on assault, nobody's calling the police, but that doesn't mean it was okay. It caught both of them off guard, and in that weird, awkward moment, like so many women have been conditioned to do, M laughed. Nervously, brushed it off. Her husband followed suit. They said something polite about updating the family, when necessary, and moved on. But her body didn't move on. Her mind didn't either, because here's what's true. Sometimes it's not about the pressure of the words, it's about the pressure in someone's grip. That grab wasn't just a moment of physical contact. It was a message, an unspoken one, a kind of warning. And that tone, "You better tell me," it didn't feel like concern. It felt like a demand, like a claim of ownership over something she has no right to own. And maybe the most frustrating part, M can't even talk about it without sounding like she's overreacting. At least that's how she feels. It was just a moment. Maybe she didn't mean it that way. We laughed, so it must not have been that serious. But here's what I want to say to anyone listening who's ever had a moment like that. Your body knows. If something leaves you with a knot in your stomach days later, that's not an overreaction, that's a reaction. Why do we so often discount these subtle moments? Why do we tell ourselves we need proof before we're allowed to feel uncomfortable, especially when it comes from family? And isn't that part of the issue? Because she's family, it's harder to call it what it is. It makes you wonder, when does just family being family turn into emotional pressure? Or worse, a slow erosion of your personal space? I want to hear your take on this. Have you ever had a moment with someone, maybe a relative, where something small stuck with you? A tone, a gesture, a touch that you just couldn't shake? What did you do? And more importantly, did anyone else believe you when you brought it up? Have you ever had someone tell you when not to give birth because it clashes with their plans? That's the kind of bizarre logic Em is dealing with now. After the arm-grabbing incident, you'd think maybe her mother-in-law would pull back, read the room, take a hint, but no. Instead, she's been dropping these offhand comments like, "Well, you just can't have the baby on the 14th. I've got a concert that night." A concert. And the first time she said it, Em thought she misheard. Like, what? But no, she repeated it. And not just once. She's brought it up multiple times, like the due date is something you pencil in around your Mills social calendar, as if her presence is so assumed, so guaranteed, that the birth must be rescheduled to accommodate her. Here's what's so strange, and kind of revealing. Em and her husband have made it clear. She's not going to be there for the birth. That boundary has been set, gently, firmly, repeatedly. So, why does the concert even matter? If she's not invited into that space, why does it matter what night the baby comes? And that's what makes these comments so unsettling. It's not just a random complaint, it's a signal. A subtle insistence that she still sees herself in control, or at least central to the event. That no matter what's been said, she believes she has a place in that delivery room, or at the very least, that her plans should somehow influence this medical and deeply personal moment. Honestly, it's hard not to feel the narcissism in that. This isn't about connection anymore. It's about importance, about staying at the center of attention, even when the moment belongs to someone else. And it raises a deeper question. Why do some people, especially certain in-laws, see life events as stages for themselves instead of spaces for support? Birth, weddings, even funerals, there's always that one person who seems to think it's about them. Who can't stand the idea of being left out, even when the most respectful thing they could do is step back. What Em wants is pretty simple. Time to become a mom, privately. Space to heal. Time for her and her partner to figure out what life looks like with a brand new human in it. And eventually, yes, family will be invited in, but on their terms. So what do you do when someone refuses to take the hint, refuses to accept that this moment, for once, isn't about them? And here's the twist. Is this kind of behavior just annoying, or is it a deeper refusal to let go of control? I'd love to know what you think. Have you ever had someone act like your life event was something they had to approve or schedule around? And how did you finally make them understand it wasn't their call? How much mental space does it take to keep re-explaining something that should have only needed to be said once? Because that's what Em is feeling right now, exhausted. And not just from being 35 weeks pregnant. It's the emotional labor, the kind that's invisible but constant, the kind where you're not just growing a baby, you're also carrying the weight of other people's expectations, guilt, and entitlement. And here's the tough part. Em thought they were doing everything right. They weren't vague, they didn't ghost anyone. She and her husband had clear conversations with his mom about who would be at the birth. No surprises, no mixed signals. They were calm, firm, respectful. But when someone refuses to accept your boundary, it creates a second burden. Now you're responsible not just for your choice, but for how they feel about it. That's what Em is sitting with now, the weight of anticipation, not just about labor and motherhood, but about what might happen around it. Will her mother-in-law show up uninvited? Will there be drama in the waiting room, a scene, a guilt trip? And what if she doesn't come right away, but makes a big deal later about being excluded? That's the kind of emotional math M is having to do instead of resting, instead of preparing, instead of being present with her own experience, and that's not okay. Because birth is one of those few moments in life where everything should be centered on one person, the birthing mother. Not to be selfish, but because physically, emotionally, hormonally, and spiritually, she's the one doing the work. She deserves peace, safety, control, and anyone who tries to insert themselves into that without consent is overstepping. What makes this even more frustrating is that M has been trying to set boundaries without turning it into a fight. She uses what people call the grey rock method, answering politely, giving minimal information, staying neutral. She avoids triggering confrontation, thinking that's the more peaceful route. But sometimes, peacekeeping isn't peace at all. Sometimes it's just delay. Delay of the blow-up, delay of the boundary being tested again. So, it brings up an important question for anyone who's ever had to manage someone else's reactions over and over again. Is it really your job to soften your boundary so that it doesn't bruise someone's ego? At what point do we stop managing their disappointment and start protecting our own peace? Let's be honest, most of us have done this dance before. Smiling through discomfort, laughing off a red flag, explaining the same thing for the third time, hoping this time it'll stick. So, I want to know, have you ever felt like setting a boundary only created more emotional work for you? And if so, how did you finally reclaim your mental space? What happens when you do everything right, but still feel like someone's just waiting to cross the line? That's where M is now. She's not just preparing to give birth, she's preparing for battle. Not a physical one, not even an argument, but an emotional one. One that starts with a knock on the hospital door, or a phone call at 2 a.m. demanding to know why she wasn't told sooner, or a guilt-filled message that says, "I'm your family. I deserve to be there." It's that emotional ambush so many people know too well, especially women, especially mothers. Because setting boundaries doesn't guarantee peace, it just guarantees clarity. And that clarity can feel threatening to someone who's used to getting their way through pressure, guilt, or control. What Em really wants isn't dramatic. It isn't cruel. She wants to be the main character in her own birth story. She wants to enter motherhood with calm, support, and safety, not anxiety over whether someone will crash the most vulnerable moment of her life. She's done everything she can, set boundaries, communicated clearly, stayed respectful. Now, she has one job left: trust herself. Trust that it's okay to protect her peace, even if someone else feels left out. Trust that being nice isn't more important than being safe. Trust that her instincts matter because they're not just about her anymore. They're about her baby too. And listen, maybe this story hits a little too close to home for some of you. Maybe you were the one setting boundaries. Or maybe you were the one who felt left out and didn't understand why. Either way, this isn't about blame. It's about something we all need to do a little more of, respecting the space someone else says they need. Because sometimes love means stepping forward, and sometimes real love means stepping back. So here's what I want to leave you with today. Let's take a moment and support each other in this. If you've ever had to set a boundary with a difficult family member, drop a in the comments. If someone ever crossed that line anyway, hit so we know you've been there too. And if you believe that mums should have full control over their birthing space, smash that and let it be known. Let's make this space a place where boundaries are respected, not debated, where experience is honoured, and where mums, just like Em, don't have to fight for basic respect. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with another story that might just sound a little like yours.